Thank you, everyone, for coming back for another season of conversations with passionate professionals. I'm so excited that we get to kick off this season with a really special guest, CEO of Austere, Deena. Deena, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm super glad to be here.
How about you just take a couple seconds and introduce yourself? Where are you joining us from? A little bit about your role today, and we'll jump into some questions.
Yeah, you got it. So my name is Deena Ghazarian. I'm the CEO and founder, like you mentioned, of a company called Austere. That's a home theater accessories company. I live in Los Angeles, so I'm in sunny Southern California, and here we are, October 18th, and it is 90 degrees outside. So
Yeah,
it is cool, Southern California, warm at all times.
I know it's crazy.
Yeah, I come route via Arizona, so like born and raised in Arizona. Went to school here in Southern California and stayed. Did a 3-year stint in the Bay Area, froze my tush off, came back, and we've been back here ever since.
We're about 10 degrees cooler here in the Bay Area. It's about
Yes,
81
you
degrees today. But
yeah, no,
definitely, if you're spoiled by that sunshine, I totally get it.
yeah, but it is Indian summertime right now, or I
Yeah,
don't even know if you can call it that anymore, but it's that kind of like summertime where it is September, October in the Bay Area. There's nothing more beautiful at
yeah.
all.
San Francisco has been amazing. We were up there this past weekend, and I have to say it was gorgeous. So the perks of the Bay in the few
Yes.
weeks where we get that weather. But
Yeah.
okay, so let's go back. This show is all about getting to know our guests and actually how they ended up into the profession that they are today. And I'm very honored to have a CEO on the show. I know time is of the essence for you all, so let's make it worthwhile and just talk about like the beginning roots. You said you were born and raised in Arizona.
Mhm.
Um, Tell me a little bit about your family and your upbringing. What did that look like between the ages of when you can remember to like that middle school time?
Absolutely. So I am the eldest of three girls. Our dad was your typical Middle Eastern dad. Every
Okay.
boy on the block was scared to death of him, and he raised his three girls like boys.
Yeah.
So if you talk to myself or either of my sisters, he was an entrepreneur. My dad literally
Mm,
owned and acquired commercial real estate. He managed it, he sold it, he leased it, he was a landlord, he did all of that type of thing. So that whole spirit of entrepreneurship was always kind of like there. Didn't know what it was called, didn't know, he was his own boss. We all knew
sure.
kind of that. But other than that, we just grew up where it was do not take no for an answer. Doesn't matter who you are, what
Oh
you do,
yeah.
you find a way
Sure.
around it, you make it
Yeah.
happen. You work your tush off to make it happen.
Absolutely.
Hard work was definitely one of those things that, was kind of instilled in all of us. You could never get where you wanted to be if you
Mm,
weren't willing to put in the hard work type of thing.
yeah.
So that
So
definitely
so
something
did
I learned.
dad kind of inspire so you're let's say what did 12-year-old Dina say she wanted to be when she grew up?
So I definitely not an entrepreneur,
I was
definitely
gonna
not a business owner, not even close. Absolutely the opposite of what my dad wanted me to do is what I wanted to
sure.
do. I honestly wanted to be an environmental scientist and probably go
Okay.
into law with an environmental science degree. Funny enough, and I'm still super passionate about sustainability and what that means now
Yeah.
more from a business standpoint, but I always had that in me for some reason where if I was going to change the world, that's how I wanted to do it.
Wow. That's cool.
So it's like every bio class, chem class, like OChem, did it even all through college. Like I made the shift
Wow.
last minute, even in college, not to go, I had graduated. I was literally going to an environmental law program in New York that was one of the first of its kind. And he finally sat me down and said, "Oh my God, please don't do that. Can you just work first? There's like so many attorneys. Don't just work first. And then if you don't like it, defer, go back. But this is what I think you should try it. And then tell me you don't
Yeah.
like it and do whatever."
So this was dad telling you this advice after you had graduated? Yeah.
Yes. So
Okay.
graduated from college. So,
Yeah.
I went through high school. And by the way, like athlete, swam,
Oh yeah,
actually,
talk to me about that. What did you
no.
play in?
So I was a swimmer. So I was a
All
backstroker,
right.
100 meter, 200
Okay.
meter, IM, which is the individual medley where you do all four strokes. Swam all throughout high school, actually got me into college with a small scholarship where I actually went to school knowing that I was going to go swim there at the college.
What college, by the way?
So I went to Claremont McKenna College, and it's a
Okay.
small liberal arts college on in Southern California. It's one of five of the Claremont colleges. The Claremont colleges are pretty badass.
Yeah.
Could
Okay.
not
Shout out
get
to
into
Claremont.
Claremont today. Yeah, couldn't get into Claremont today like I could, 25, 30 some odd years ago. It is five colleges made up of Harvey Mudd, Pomona, Pitzer, Scripps, and Claremont McKenna. And what was
Awesome.
cool about that school is you joined forces. So, like Claremont Mudd Scripps was one athletic group, Pomona
Hmm.
Pitzer was the other athletic group. So you got to meet a lot of other kids on a bunch of different campuses that you were, family with, because when you're an athlete, that's kind of how that works.
Yeah.
Also, you could take classes at the other classes too, or other schools and colleges too, which was pretty fun and
Hmm.
fascinating. But back to high school, like I swam, I cheered, I don't know, I was in every advanced class you could take. I
Sure.
will say my daughter's learning how to drive right now. I am shocked that there is no driver's ed course. Like
Oh my
how
goodness.
like the fact that I have to be the one to teach my daughter is
Yeah.
disturbing, shocking. Like, why
Yeah.
would you do that to parents? But it is, so you did, just went to an awesome public high school, graduated with honors, top of my class, and then decided I was going to Southern California and got myself
Uh,
into a small little liberal arts college that the school was no bigger. The full school was smaller than my graduating class from high school.
wow. Wow.
Graduated with about seven kids, my senior class,
Mhm.
and Claremont when I started was six.
Wow. So you go there to swim. You're
It's
this outgoing. You can already tell Dina has an amazing personality, and I would just say for the
I
audience
haven't been.
listening, you're one of three kids, and I can almost imagine Dina throughout high school building some of these life skills that have carried you into the position where you are today. So, as we take a moment to pause for this high school break before we get into conversations post college, what would you say is the biggest takeaway, having been involved in all of these different activities, having kind of your pops, drilling down, the back of your neck, like, hey, you got to get out there and work for what you get. It paid off. You graduated with honors. So, what would you say to the people out there who are trying to raise kids? Myself, I got two daughters, soon to be, and I'm like not even there yet on what I should be doing as far as preparing my kids for a um, diverse here in the Bay Area, all of the uphill battles they'll be being able to kind of overcome in their future. So for Dina, that was kind of a long way to throw a softball up. What is that takeaway for someone who is in your seat today? What did you take away from that experience as a teenager here in Arizona?
Yeah, in Arizona. So I'm going to give you a couple answers because I think it's there's a couple things. The first is the work ethic, and what's great about work ethic is work ethic brings failure. You don't always win. You don't always get it together, and actually, that is where you learn the most. I truly have to catch myself because I feel like you want to put these bumpers around your children because you don't want them to get hurt. And we are preventing independence and understanding that failure is okay. And you need to step it up type of thing as an individual. So that's kind of number one. Number two was because I kind of was involved in a lot. I was that kid who did, I think, way too much. Like now that I look back, I tell my daughter, don't go wide, go deep. But I ran wide. And I will say the one learning from that was pretty amazing was I had friends and I learned about different people across all
Hmm,
different passions, right? Because in high school,
sure.
it's not about who you are and what you do from like a work perspective, but it's what you're
Yeah.
passionate about, right? So athletes are passionate about their sports. And then, you have the academics that are passionate about what they're studying. And then you have arts and anybody in the arts, what their passion. So you learn when you're involved in all these different things, how to relate and how
Mhm.
to bring others together because not
Yeah.
everybody is across all of those things. So I would say that was kind of a blessing in disguise by kind of doing a
Yeah.
lot. So that was two. And then number three, funny enough, my mom taught me, not my dad.
Okay.
And she made me probably, which kind of plays off number two a little bit,
Mhm.
she made me super observant, meaning
Mm.
always like know who's in front of you, behind you, on either side, know what's happening around you. Don't be, kind of ignorant to the situation. Just don't float in and be like, I'm here. Like literally strategically look at what
Yeah.
is happening and know how to react to it. Funny enough, I will tell you that's probably one of the skills still to this day that I believe if you don't build when you're young, it's very, very hard to integrate
Mm.
into your future self.
Yeah, I love the awareness part there in number 3. I think it's really important. Just navigating career, navigating teams. It's a social awareness too that plays and pays dividends into so many situations. So I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so those were 3 great takeaways. I hope you're taking notes for those listening. So we're gonna move into you graduating now. You're passionate about the sciences and
Oh,
giving
yeah.
back to the environment, but it's like pump the brakes. Let before you dive.
My thesis on congestion and
Oh
how
my! All this time, all this
this is
energy.
all in, baby. Like I can't even begin to explain to you how I was
Yeah.
all in. So well, so here's honestly, like, I went to a great public high school, but in fairness, growing up at that time, and I think a lot of it is now too, they teach you how to regurgitate really well, but they don't necessarily teach you how to think. And I know I don't want to blanket that on every public school.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just
Sure.
do think it's the system, right? And then went to this small liberal arts school where they sat you down and they're like, not only do we want you to have an opinion, you better figure out how to back up your opinion or we're literally not going to support it and we will take you
Sure.
out type of thing, right? So
Yeah.
I had to learn how to think, as I like to say, really, really fast. And it was a it was a blessing in disguise, but it also allowed me to think on the fly, shift on the fly. If someone came up with a argument or statement that I truly passionately believed in, but it was against what it was that I was talking about. How do you incorporate that in? How do you work around it? How do you say you're right, but you're still wrong? Like all of those things to move the conversation forward. It was pretty great. So, um, that was a lot of Claremont. And then again, to your point, get all the way to the end,
Yeah.
get into this environmental law school. Dad sits me down and in fairness, my dad had gotten sick
Okay.
and we didn't know it was cancer and we didn't know what it was going to do. So I think it just, it's one of those grounding moments in your life where you probably listen more than you normally would
Yeah.
to your
Yeah.
parents to some degree. And I'm older. I'm honestly, you're such a different person when you go in at 18 and you come out at 21 and still are
Tell
a
me
different
about
person
that.
when you come
Yeah.
out at like 28.
Yeah.
So he's just like, listen, I just think you need to, you've never really, like I worked, but I never really worked, right? Like I worked and when I was in high school, I had a job every Saturday as a cashier at a car wash. Okay, well, it was a party the entire time I was there. I got my car wash
Right.
for free. It was great. Then, and then I went to Claremont. I had a couple jobs on campus. Because I thought again, I wanted to be an attorney in environmental law. I was working for the public defender in Rancho Cucamonga, which maybe was a 10-minute drive. And so never really like worked. And when he meant worked, I was
Yeah.
working, but I mean, interacting with the consumer, talking to
Mm.
a real life person every day, selling, having
Mhm.
a conversation, like all of that type of thing. So okay, then I'm going to go interview for the jobs that I think I want. And I'll do what I want to do for a year and then go from there. He's like, great. Doesn't matter what you want to do, go do it. Right. So Claremont has people like McKinsey,
Mhm.
BCG, Bain, Ernst and Young, all the consulting firms that come through. Then it has like Toyota that comes through and like picks off kids off, off the bat, et cetera. Like, and then uh, just so many of these like high level Microsoft at the time,
Mm.
Google
Okay.
didn't exist back then,
Yeah.
but Microsoft and things where they would come and talk to you. And I was like, oh God, I'm just like, I'm going to be a number. I freaking hate this. Like,
Yeah.
again, I always knew like, ugh. So funny enough, the gentleman from Macy's rolls in and
Okay.
I'm like, oh, executive training. Like, I would love to learn how, like, I was smart enough to know, oh my God, these people will pay me to go through their executive training program. They're a Fortune 50 to say I went through this executive training program will be pretty great. So let's see what they have to say type of thing. So the gentleman who interviewed me is a guy by the name of Gene Ross. He has since passed away. Wonderful man. He actually is the same gentleman who recruited Terry Lundgren who
No
was the
way.
CEO of Macy's for
Yeah, yeah.
years out of the U of A, who also, by the way, fun fact, because I got to know Terry later and it was a fun conversation to talk about Mr. Ross. Terry wanted to be a veterinarian and actually walked out of class one day after delivering like a pony. Okay. He was delivering a horse. He had his hands and everything. He's like, oh, I just knew at that moment it was not me. And he completely went in a different direction. And Gene ended
Oh,
up hiring him. And then he ended up, 15 years later, 20 years later, ended up becoming the CEO of Macy's and took it to like
that's
where
awesome.
they bought Bloomingdale's, they bought all the different chains, they merged them, they went public as them. They like it was pretty crazy what
Hmm.
he did. So Gene sits me down and says, oh, I know about you people from like these schools. You think you're so great and Macy's is not good enough for you. So he goes, let me do this. He goes, so I'm going to sit here. I'm going to tell you a couple things. And then you go like do a little homework and then come back to me. I'm like, okay. He goes, how many of you of the companies that you're talking to are going to let you manage a book of business that's $10 million or more from day one? And I'm like,
That's an awesome pitch right there. Right.
okay. And then he's like,
Yeah.
how many of them are going to let you work with executives at the top levels, right? Where
Yeah.
they will train you. So not only do you get to work with them, they will train you on what to do because that's what this program is all about. And I'm like, okay.
So
And
you
then
have to pause here for a second because there's this amazing opportunity that's falling into your lap. And for the listeners who are listening out there, Deena ends up being with Macy's for over 25 years of experience, and it's just an amazing journey there. But here we are at the beginning of where this all started, and you're describing something that just sounds like it's so easy, but I'm sure there. What do you think it was in that either interview or
it was
this back and
it
forth?
was him.
What
See,
tell
I
me
say
about
this all
that.
the time. It's people. There are certain people that you will meet in life where you're like,
Yeah.
not only are they offering me an opportunity, but there's something special that you can't go wrong. Like, and it's a gut
Mhm.
thing. I don't know how else to explain it. Like, I fell in love with this man, and you could tell he befriended me too a little bit, where I was
It was
like,
like a
wow.
mutual connection.
So I'll give you a great example, right? He says, well, where do you think you're going to live? And I'm like, okay, I have family in Studio City. I'm going to live in Studio City. I know that Sherman Oaks Macy's is like down the street. I'll work there. And he's like, nope, we're going to send you over the canyon. You're going to work at the Beverly Center. And I'm like, the Beverly Center? Why? And he's like, because the first female store manager ever, literally in the state of California, is running that store and you're going to learn from
Wow.
her. Right. And I'm like,
Wow.
oh, okay. And then he's like, and that store is doing, 800, $900,000 per square foot. There's not another Macy's anywhere close that's going to do that. And you're going to learn so much and you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And I'm going to put you in the situation that you would
Mhm.
never get to be put in if you walked
Mm.
in the door, right? Well, maybe you would,
Yeah.
but the chances are slimmer,
Yeah,
right?
this is a
Right.
rare
It was just one
opportunity
of those
that is.
things. Like, I'll take a bet
Mhm.
on you. And I think that's a little
I
bit
love
of
that.
what it was. And I was
Mhm.
like, and here's me. I'm only in this for a year and now I get a discount. Like, I am so in. And then back to law school I go and then never went back, like ever.
Wow. Wow. So this amazing opportunity falls into your lap, and talk to us in about your journey with Macy's. Like, where did that end up taking you? And after that year comes and goes, did you now fall in love with everything you were learning from, this new location and this rare opportunity? Was it like, oh yeah, this is my jam? Or would you say it was just too good of a situation to get out of, and so you just stuck with it? What was that story like for you?
So here I am, I started, right? And like I can't, so now I have to like throw an extra flavor and color. So this store manager, who by the way became a very, very close friend, was literally the Miranda Priestley character from A Devil Wears Prada, but in a store versus at a magazine called Runway, okay? Which is really in a Wintour out of Vogue, okay? So you like I know Lauren Weisberger, I think is her name, who wrote A Devil Wears Prada. There were a couple of us that could have written a different version of that
The
book
same.
in store for the. Okay, so
You're like, "That's my life."
my husband and I went and saw the movie because my husband ended up. I met him at Macy's and we
Okay.
went to see this movie and the two of us were like, oh my god, this is working for Elaine Pasternak. Like, it's so freaky. Like the scene, I mean, for those of you who don't know A Devil Wears Prada, I highly suggest watching it. It's actually a very good
Great
business
movie.
movie and stuff like that too, from plus entertaining. But there's that very first scene in the middle where she shows up to work and unexpected, and everybody is like freaking around, running around, throwing stuff away, putting on lipstick, putting on shoes, like doing all this stuff. And the girl who's interviewing, who's Anna Hathaway, is looking around like, what is happening? That is exactly what used to
Wow.
happen. We were in a meeting one time, Jeff, and the cosmetic manager comes running in. Sorry, she comes running in and she says, sits down for the manager's meeting, and Mrs. Pasternak, because we couldn't call her by her first name. So it was either
Hmm.
EP, which was her initials, or Mrs. Pasternak. Mrs. Pasternak says, Charisse, what department do you work in? And Charisse is like, cosmetics. She's like, okay. And in cosmetics, what is it that you sell? She's like, makeup and fragrances. She's like, awesome. So why don't you do me a favor? We'll wait. Let's come presentable to our managers' meetings. Why don't you go downstairs, put on a little lipstick, put on a little blush, and then come on back and we'll start the meeting when you're ready. And the rest of us in the room are
Oh, oh my goodness.
like that was, oh, I just can't.
Yeah.
Anyways, the learnings, like, so I tell this story all the time. So my luck, because my good friend Gene Ross, who was taking good care of Deena, is when you went to a store to be an executive trainee, you worked for a department manager. So you became an assistant manager. You had a department manager that was your boss, and you learned from them. Well, I got put in a department that had no department manager, which meant I reported directly to who was supposed to be the MM, which is the merchandise manager. Well, guess what? At the Beverly Center, the merchandise manager for the home area that I got put into was the store manager. So here I am as an assistant working directly for the store manager. And she would come up and be like, merchandise this wall. And I'm like, okay, great. So I'm like, is there like a book or guidelines?
Yeah. What does that mean? Right? Just
You figure it out. I'm like,
wow.
okay. So like I would like go look. I would like, what do other walls look like? Do this. So I would then like merchandise the wall. She'd come up, she'd be like, no, not good enough. Walk away. I'm like, oh my God. So then, and there was no Google. There was no, like, you couldn't like,
Yeah. Yeah.
shoot,
We didn't.
you
You're right.
physically had to like do the hard work, not to go
Mhm.
back to dad until you figured it out. But I mean, within, I don't know, a couple days after going through this experience a couple different times, I could merchandise anything, like to a
Yeah.
standard that was like 1,000%, not even just 100%.
Yeah, and I think this is an important part of the story of just how you've been able to get to where you are today is this resilience that I'm hearing that sounds like it was instilled to you as a child because I think in, call it 50-50. I'll give everyone a fair chance here. You're either a person who's going to take that feedback and say, "Okay, I'm just going to get this done," or you're going to be a person who gets really offended by that comment to
And
say,
be
"Oh
like,
man,
"Get
I
out of
just
here."
spent the last couple hours. You didn't tell me how to do it. I had no playbook, and you're just going to poo poo on my work and walk away, And I think this is the kind of just adversity that, I think
Okay.
makes
But
a
Jeff,
character. Yeah. Okay.
I still thought it. I just didn't say it. I had the
Okay. But
respect
yeah,
not to say it.
I think we all think it. I think that's 100% of us for sure. But I do think that there are challenges sometimes where we kind of run away from that, or we say, "Oh, you know what? See, this isn't my passion. I'm gonna walk away because I'm not good at this." To where you decided to make that kind of thought in your mind, maybe, but the what was kind of manifested was something totally different, which was
Well,
okay. Let
but
me try
here's
again.
what's super important about that. So this is where I cannot stress enough. That's how some people teach, right, wrong, or indifferent. And
Hmm.
if you lean in to show, hey, you know what? I'm willing to do what it takes.
Hmm.
So what happened after that first couple weeks of that then turned into a freight train of fantastic. We're remodeling the store. I'm going to have you stay here and work with the people to make sure it gets done. Fantastic. We're opening up a Christmas store out in the mall. You're going to open it, run it, soup to nuts, right? So by the way, what was managing $10 million in a year ended up becoming managing $12 million in 3 months out of a Christmas store type of thing,
Yeah.
right? Then she was like, great. Now you're going to become a department. So though there were a bunch of us in this program at this store, the speed that I went through within my journey was 10 times faster than anybody else because not only was I with her,
Mhm.
as my manager. But more importantly, it was, I'm not afraid of you. Like, I'm really not
Yeah.
afraid. I'm respectful. I may think you're cuckoo, but I don't open my mouth, and I'm going to do it because I don't
I'm gonna
care
do
and
it.
I'm learning. And I think when you have that type of attitude, people don't realize how many additional doors will open for them when it comes to working for leadership. Like I cannot stress enough. I'm trying to teach my daughter that right now, but in a student teacher environment. Every
Mhm.
teacher in the world wants you just to come talk to them, to work with them, to learn from them. Most kids are afraid. The kids that talk to the teachers are the ones that win, the ones that get the extra opportunities, the ones that will get to do
Yeah.
the retakes, like all of that, because the teacher's like, wow, this person actually was willing to lean in, care, try harder. It
Yeah.
makes such a difference. And I don't think people are being taught that anymore, to be honest. And it's a mistake.
Let's really emphasize this point here, and if you can articulate then what that advice would be to somebody, as you sat on both sides. Now you sat on someone who was new learning from someone who was very senior, and you kind of did the right thing in that situation that allowed more doors to be open. And now you sit in a seat at a very senior level where you have the opportunity to give the chance to someone else. So if you were to articulate what that advice would be to be the person who makes the right move when they're given direction from a senior leader, what is it?
So it's as simple as this: those who lean in will get mentored fastest and will literally get brought to the top of the line for any opportunity, period.
I love that. Amazing. So Macy's is this skyrocketing opportunity. How long were you at Macy's for?
So I was there for about 8 years, and not to tell another story, but because I did lean in and there was a trust, because trust, you know what? Didn't mention that. Trust gets formed when you
There you
do
go.
that.
Okay.
So because there was trust, like the CEO would come and do a store visit, and she would literally push me right up in front of him and be like, you tell them that the buyers are not buying what you need. So I'm like, okay, so this fun fact story. So it's 95,
Mhm.
6, right in there.
Mhm.
And I'm running handbags as one of the departments. I'm in accessories, which is so freaking funny since all I do is accessories all day, every day. It's just
Yeah.
crazy. It's
Yeah.
been my life. And the CEO at the time comes over and says, what is it that you need? I said, well, I've been doing a lot of homework, and there's this new brand on the scene in handbags called Kate Spade. You need to go get Kate Spade for me. I guarantee you it will single-handedly double my volume. And I was already doing in handbags about $30 million out of this single store, because I was doing a ton of, at the time, Dooney and Burke, Coach, DKNY, Ralph Lauren made a Polo sport bag. Like I was printing money. And so that's why he cared so much. And then he said, and I said, but this Kate Spade brand is the new brand. And he says, okay, who has it? I said, just Neiman's. Go get it. And he's like, okay. So apparently he goes and asks, he calls Mrs. Pasternak back like maybe like a month later, and he says, do me a favor, tell Deena thank you. I went to go ask. They will not give it to me for Macy's, but they have given it to us for all of Bloomingdale's.
Wow.
My merchants didn't even know about it. Tell her thank you and say, I apologize because you can't have it, but you can have whatever bag you want. Go buy it at Bloomingdale's. Oh my
Yeah.
God. So, but that was me at like 23. Like who would ever get that opportunity to have that conversation and stuff like that? But
I
that's where
hear the
the
opportunity, but I
trust.
also hear the trust, but I also hear what you mentioned earlier in the podcast, which was being aware of your surroundings. You knew who was to the left, who was to the right, and you had knew that Kate Spade was this up and coming brand. So, man, I'm hearing a lot of these life skills that have developed in you kind of come through in your story, which is amazing. So,
Yeah,
thank
no
you.
fear. Just ask. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Someone's going to say no,
No.
and figure out another way to ask the question, because someone will always say yes at some point.
Yeah.
Like, it's
I
just
love it.
a no brainer. But I was there to answer your earlier question. So I was there from 94 until two,
Okay.
a little over almost 7 years. And we had moved to the Bay Area. So I met my husband. We had got married. We moved to the Bay Area,
Is he
started
from the Bay?
working. No, he's
Okay.
actually from Southern California.
Okay.
We both working for the same company, and he was in operations and I was a merchant and in sales and everything. And everyone's like, oh, like it was just not two people working, being married, working for the same company, not smart.
Yeah.
So it was 90. So two, it was the
Mm,
boom before the
okay.
bust.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go get a .com job and get options and we going to strike it rich. Woo!
You're in Bay, Silicon Valley. Look at all these jobs.
So went looking. I got a job at a startup called Replay TV. And for those who were around back in the day, Replay TV and TiVo were rivals
Evo.
around the DVR technology, which is
Yeah.
the digital video recording technology. And the CEO of Replay was Anthony Wood, who's now the CEO of Roku. And so Replay was his first time out. We did not win that. Well, he did not win that war. He definitely won the second time around big.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But again, someone who also went in, did it all, learned from its mistakes, and then kind of went around the next time. But I was there for about a year. We burned through all of our money. They had to sell off all the assets. Everyone lost their job when the bust happened, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
then I was like, this tech thing is awesome. There's no way I'm leaving. I'm like one of, at the time, 3 women in the entire industry. I have a unique name. So like they remember my name. I'm like, I am not leaving. And
Yeah.
I get this. I was always kind of tech savvy. So I'm
Sure.
like, oh, I can do this all day, every day. In the Bay Area at the time, a couple of my merchants and buyers, because I had Best Buy West. So I
Okay.
had any major account you can imagine, including Amazon, by the way, when they first
Hmm.
started
Wow.
West. And one of my buyers said, hey, listen, there's this other company in the Bay Area called Monster Cable. You may want to go
Mhm.
talk to them. Here's their info, la, la, la. So I reached out, they interviewed me, and they were all like, oh, the CEO is brutal. And I'm like, bring it. You guys have no, I mean, I've worked for the CEO and like,
Yeah.
there's no way anyone could top what I've already learned.
Yeah.
Like,
You can't top
whatever.
devil meat or
Like,
devilware.
you
Yeah.
can, yeah,
Yeah.
Devil Wears Prada could not be topped.
Yeah.
So interviewed, kind of got all the way to my interview with the CEO at the time. And he literally spent, I don't know, 5 minutes with me. And he's like, and you're not qualified for this job you're interviewing for. I'm like, okay, sweet. Thank you. That was like the sweetest way to say no ever. And he said, but I really like you. Let me create a job. And I'm like, oh yeah, right. Like you're going to create a job. Okay. Thanks so much. And sure enough, like 2 days later, they call, they're like, hey, we're creating this job.
Wow.
We think you would be great at it. And come on board. Let's go.
Mhm.
I was like, oh, okay. And then that proceeded to be a 15-year journey
Wow.
with Monster
Mhm.
on the home theater accessory side. And then for those who are not familiar with Monster Cable, which those most people in our space are, but if you are not, the one thing we did do that everybody knows about is we were the original partner that helped Beats build Beats by Dr. Dre headphones. And so I was around from like, I took our CEO to Interscope the day they had the interview and like two,
Wow.
like it's because it's obviously it's here in
Yeah.
Southern California. So we get the Beats deal gets up and running. I am the sucker that lives in Southern California. So I get to go to that office every day and try to help build a brand that when I tell you nobody wanted it, nobody wanted it. Like we
That's
leveraged
interesting.
every relationship. People are like, who's Dr. Dre? Is he an audio doctor? Why would you put an audio doctor say? And I'm freaking Gen X. Who doesn't know doctor? I'm like,
Yeah.
how do you guys not know who like because it was crazy. Like you talk to a Gen Xer, of course they knew
Mhm.
who Dre was. You talk
Right.
to a boomer, no idea. You talk to a millennial, no idea. The only way maybe a millennial might get it is you're like, hey, so there's this guy named Eminem, and they're like, oh yeah, Eminem. That's the guy who makes all of Eminem's music. And they're like, oh, but like they didn't know.
Yeah. That's crazy.
So
That's so bizarre.
yeah, and then that was just in itself a story.
I mean, you went from one well, it's safe to say, right, that you're telling a story that's totally different from today. Like everybody has beats today. Like it blew up to this huge success, but you really got to be a part of some amazing companies that probably paid so much dividends into you branching out and
Yeah.
being your own CEO today, especially with your experience in home theater and working for the accessories department. So I guess where I want to kind of land this plane is I want the one story that really triggered you to say, hey, one day I'm going to do this for myself while you were at Monster. slash working
I
with
actually have
some of
that.
the,
This is
yeah, I want to know what that pivoting point was.
Yeah, no, I actually can very easily articulate it. I knew kind of, well, it's a two-part story. So let me do
Okay.
the two-part story. So when Monster was so focused on beats, we ignored our what I would call our bread and butter, which was cable and power. And I created a little skunk works group within Monster to fix it, rebrand it, remake it, do what we needed to do. And the CEO at the time said, sure, go ahead. It's not my priority right now. If you want to play with it and do it, do it. So I started with cable. I took the group at Best Buy. We sat down together and said, if we were going to make a product line that is complementary to what you do, where I help you and you help me, and we take the ASP and we triple it or double it, actually. Really, the goal was double it. We ended up tripling it. Where if I take my ASPs up, that allows you to take your ASPs up. We just harmoniously live together and nobody interferes in anybody's space. Will you do it with me? And they're like, absolutely. So like they came out, we talked about features, we, talked about branding, we did all this stuff. It's funny. I sat down and anything at Monster before had been numbers, like, I don't know, like HDMI, 3 series. I don't know. It was like all these different numbers always. And because of all the changes with HDMI and the certification, it was very clunky out there and there was a lot of issues and all that fun stuff. So I felt like we needed to change the name. And if we changed the name, it would clean up what was in the market and allow us an opportunity to really brand effectively what we were trying to do and get higher price points. So that happened right around the time that American Express came out with a Black Platinum Amex.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I got it. So we're going to do Black Platinum, Platinum, and Gold, just like Amex. We'll rebrand. We have the new features. We'll reprice where it should be, et cetera, and go. And it took me a week every day hounding the CEO to change the name because he's like, it's always been numbers. It's always been numbers. It's always been numbers. I'm like, I know you can go back to number. Let's just clean ourselves up with this. And I really
Yeah.
think that more customers are going to relate to this naming nomenclature because they're going to get it, right?
Yeah.
And finally, because I was again relentless, he kept saying no, no, no. And you know me, I will never take no for an answer.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, whatever. So he finally said, fine, I'll let you do it. And if it fails, I'm going to fire you. I said, and I will go out with pride. Like, not even a question. That's how confident I am. So he's like, okay. So we changed it. We literally took the ASPs up to a point where it was just right where it needed to be. And
Okay.
normally in a best, better, good setting, better will always outsell, right? So not everybody takes best, but they don't always want good. Some will
Hmm.
always go good, but some won't. And you'll
Hmm.
end up with the most sales in better. Fact of life. So we get it out there, and no joke, the high end Black Platinum is outselling everything 3 to 1
Amazing.
at
Wow.
the high price point. And then I'm like, crap, we didn't go high enough with the price point.
Yeah. We could have
God
got
damn it.
more. Yeah.
All the things, right? And then we rebranded Off Power that way. We rebranded everything. I mean, it changed everything. It tripled the ASP. Best Buy was excited. Everybody was excited because of what happened. So at that moment, I was like, okay, I could do
Yeah.
this,
That was
right?
that was
I
the
could
aha moment.
really do this and I get it. And then funny enough, after that success, I'm like, oh my God, let's do it with gaming. Let's do it with that. Like I had all these ideas and stuff. And right around that time, one of our very best friends passed away young at like 42 and left a 3-year-old behind. And I was just like, I'm done. Like, this is my sign. It is time for me to figure this out. So I said, I'm give a month's notice. Didn't really have a plan. They said, oh my God, you can't just give a month's notice. Can you consult for at least 6 months? Because there's no way we can hand everything off. I said, sure. But the day to day, the travel all over the world, all that stuff, I'm done in a month. And that's when I made the decision to kind of go out on my own. And then, as you know, Jeff, Scott Hicks found, and came and flew down and said, we are restarting a company and you're going to do it right by my side. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, so this is what we do at Target Path and we consult and we build brands or whatever. And I'm like, wait, you're a consultant? No, thank you. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
He's like, no, but it's not like that because we provide fractional resources and we treat the business like it's ours. Like you would be the leader of a manufacturer in conjunction with leadership. Like it's just different, I promise. try it. And if you don't like it, then okay, fine. But if you like it, then you have to stay. And then here we are 8 years later. So,
Wow, amazing. I want to go back to that moment where you made this decision about a naming convention. And it's for all the listeners out there, it's like, man, she thought of a new naming convention and now she's a CEO. And so I want to I want to just take a moment right there to say it was something more than that. I think it's a self-realization where you said I can do this. And you even I think verbatim said that. So tell us a little, what was it that you realized you could do? So you have now been in the business for, I would say, some time, going from Macy's to a top tech company in the Bay Area to a huge brand that blows up with the consumer electronics. So what was it that you realized, gosh, I can do it?
yeah.
What is the it? Like the it
So,
factor, a lot of people ask about it.
yeah,
What
no,
is
no, no.
that?
I think I can define that. So, everything I did up until that point, it was
Hmm.
somebody else's brainchild and I executed it. And let me tell you, I was a badass executor. I can
Hmm.
execute anything, right? Like, think about back to my original days at Macy's. I was kind of taught
Hmm.
to be an execution machine, right?
Yeah, sure.
When you're taught that way, though, you don't necessarily always, and though you can be taught to be strategic and have thoughts and all of that, really doing it on your own is just different. And that was the first time where I was held accountable that if I failed, but I was also, that it was my throat to choke, I guess, but it was also like that point of like, oh my God, not only did I do this, I blew it away. Like
Yeah.
beyond my expectations. Like I set goals and it was like way even beyond that. And so that's where I would say it was the lever, not that I didn't have confidence, but it was a different type of security and confidence of like, okay,
Mm.
right? I don't need to just execute under somebody. I could do this and do this all day long with my eyes closed. And even if I'm wrong, at least I know I have the confidence to make the decision, which by the way, like half of the people in the room, including the CEO, right? Who was like, no, 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 didn't want to make the change because they were so used to the old versus thinking about doing something new. And I think that's where it was just like, okay, damn, I could do this.
Yeah, and that's what I love about this show is I get to talk to folks who have a very untraditional path of how they've ended up to where they are. And I think a lot of the times we think that there's this certain playbook and you have to go to this school and graduate with this and make sure you follow this career path. And your story is a testament that you just need to make sure that you are giving yourself room to be in a room of people who can give you opportunity. You have to build trust. You have to be a person who can be in an environment with diversity. And I heard all of these qualities come out today. So, last question for you is, as a CEO, what is the advice that you would leave to someone who might not necessarily be saying, "Oh, I want to be the next CEO of a company," but that is definitely saying, "I definitely want to do something that, you know, grinds my gears, that makes me wake up every single day in the morning and be excited about what I want to do." What is that secret sauce to be able to have a job that allows you to do that every day?
Yeah. So I think at any job, if you raise your hand and set and volunteer and lean in, it will long term pay you back, right? I think unfortunately a lot of people today say, well, I don't want to do more work unless I'm paid to do that or unless someone, or I'm scared to ask because what if I offend somebody? And I don't think it's like that at all. I actually think every time I leaned in and started kicking butt, it was actually easier for me to ask for a raise. It was actually easier for me to ask for the promotion because now I'm in there, now I'm doing more. And they're like, oh, we can't lose this person, right? Like they've become so valuable that we don't want to lose them. And I'm not saying, and not everybody's replaceable. Always,
Yeah.
always, always. But man, some people hurt more than others. I don't care what anybody says. And so you want to put yourself in a situation where it would hurt, right? It would hurt for someone to lose you. And I think that's where, you just lean in, volunteer, and go.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you so much. This has been so beneficial, even just for myself. If we get no listeners besides me, this was very beneficial for me.
Thank you, Jeff.
So, but I know a lot of people are going to tune in and they're going to love your story. I encourage anyone out there. You can find Deena on LinkedIn. who's very active, and see her story, watch this company grow. And any last words for the audience out there?
No, just lean in and make sure that you do what you feel is right in your gut, and those decisions will never steer you wrong, ever.
I love that. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to this week's episode of Conversations with Passionate Professionals. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Jeff.